Good afternoon, everyone. We'll just get started, even though people are still coming in. We've got 26 people now, which is really good. And if people come in throughout as we go, then that's fine. Just before we start, just a few points. We set this up as a meeting, so that you all have microphones, and there's also the chat function. We would love this to be an engaging conversation, and particularly at the end when we have a Q&A session for anyone who has questions or wants to share any other thoughts. But maybe just up until that point, just remember to keep on mute, because we are also recording this for later, so it'd be good for other people to be able to be able to watch through. And also, when we get to the Q&A, just so that we can structure the conversation, there is a function for putting your hand up so that we can see who would like to say something. But I'm really grateful to all of you for coming along today, for showing an interest in the developments that have happened for us as an organization in recent weeks, months, and years. And it's a great turnout we've got on the call, because we have a really big mix from all over the world, and so it could be an interesting conversation. Something to bear in mind is that some of you will know more about the work that Cohere does than others, and so if you don't know that much, it's fine. Don't be shy to ask questions. But equally, if you hear something that you already know, it might be because there are people who know a bit less. So I also want to say I've got some of my colleagues here today, which is great. They might also help answer any questions. I particularly want to introduce Chrissy. Chrissy is also helping me co-host and moderate, and Chrissy's also, yeah, there's Chrissy. So Chrissy's also done a huge amount of the work behind this rebrand as well. So I want to say right at the beginning, massive credit and thanks to Chrissy for all of this hard work. Okay, so so we are Cohere, and at Cohere we want to see a world in which everyone has control over their future, including and especially refugees. The story of refugees is not one simply of vulnerability and dependency, although refugees have gone through the traumatizing experience of being forcibly displaced from their homes and from their countries of origins. Refugees all over the world are building stronger communities and forging a path towards self-reliance in refugee hosting areas. Refugees are themselves leading the positive changes in their communities. We would like the lead of refugees to be followed. We'd like local leaders to make the decisions that affect the lives of the people in their communities. At Cohere, our commitment to working with refugees remains as strong as it's ever been. We partner with inspiring refugees, mostly those who are running local organizations known as refugee-led organizations, or RLOs. But there are also refugee leaders running similar kind of projects that are playing a vital role in responding to the humanitarian needs of their communities. Currently, we have a comprehensive relationship with around 30 or more refugee-led organizations in Kenya and Uganda. And that's out of a network of several hundred refugee-led organizations that we interact with regularly, including some refugee-led organizations or RLOs in other African countries. Why do we think it's important that RLOs should take a lead in refugee communities? RLOs are the first and last line of defense for their communities in terms of being the first responders whenever there's a new crisis that emerges. And this was made really clear during the COVID-19 crisis, which is still ongoing, when many other kinds of humanitarian actors, maybe like large NGOs, were not able to continue their usual day-to-day activities. And that was when refugee leaders stepped up. But in fact, they were also doing the same work they'd done before. It's just that they were able to do more of it, and they didn't have to retreat from the setting they were working in. If anything, they were able to and needed to do more. So an example of an RLO that we've worked with for many years is Tomorrow Vijana, which means Tomorrow Youth. They're based in Ramwanja refugee settlement in southwest Uganda. And I'll be introducing you to more of our refugee-led organization partners throughout this presentation, and talking more about the kind of work that they do. But a good example of Tomorrow Vijana is that they reach around 1,000 people a year at the moment through their activities across the settlement. So many different activities, from education to livelihoods, as well as agriculture and environmental projects. And they really started all this themselves from an early, in 2014, 2015, when they were a small group trying to teach each other English without even any physical structure. Refugee-led organizations have demonstrated that they can respond effectively to the needs of their communities. One of the reasons that we've been inspired to work with RLOs is how efficient and effective their interventions and their innovations are. But aside from being effective and efficient, and we have found through various practical studies that there's a significant reduction in terms of cost efficiency when refugee leaders take over. Their initiatives are also more sustainable. They're also more relevant because they understand the needs in the community, and they're able to respond in a way that really matches the need. And as a result of this, the impact and the outcomes that they achieve tend to be more sustainable from what we have observed. But in addition, the activities themselves, like the types of interventions or the type of work that they do, seems to be able to go on for longer because there is an obvious need for what they're offering, in comparison to maybe other actors, other humanitarian groups who are maybe more vulnerable to changes in focus and funding, etc. Because of these reasons, as well as others, we also see that refugee-led initiatives are the most appropriate way of supporting refugees in their communities, because the people who are themselves affected by crisis and by displacement are making the decisions that affect their lives. Refugee-led organizations have been around for many years, and in East Africa, they're refugee-led organizations that have existed certainly since the 90s. We have a partner that was founded in 1997 called Bondeko, still going strong. And so it's not a new trend. It's true to say that in recent years, RLOs have really increased what they're able to do. They have finally received more recognition for what they're doing, and gradually more support from the global humanitarian sector, as well as donors around the world and other kinds of supporters. But the amount of support and recognition that they get is still a fraction of the potential and a fraction of what's needed for refugee leaders themselves to play a really meaningful role in the overall refugee response. And this is a serious problem, because around the world, the number of people who have been forcibly displaced is dramatically increasing, and it's over doubled since Xavier Project began in 2008. Yet the amount of funding available has been reducing, particularly in recent years, and you can see from this slide that the COVID crisis had a significant impact on the need for emergency relief funding and the availability of funding for non-COVID responses. And you can see on the bottom graph that only 52% of the needs have been met. And yet the number of refugees around the world is increasing. And so we really do need a new way of working, because what the traditional models of responding to refugee crises isn't working, and yet the need is increasing. We're excited and feel positive and hopeful about this trend of refugee-led organizations and the quite rapidly increasing impact and influence that RLOs are having within the humanitarian sector. But it's really a drop in the ocean at the moment of the full potential of what could be achieved if refugee leaders really have control over the decisions that affect their communities and control over the resources that are being contributed towards refugee responses. So Cohere, we are excited to have our new brand and our new name. As I think all of you will know who are on this call, Cohere is the new name of the organization previously called Xavier Project, which began in 2008. And ever since that time, we've been focused, and we've always worked closely with refugees, and our work with refugees is what we exist for. We started out in education, and the concept at the time was very similar in many ways and principles to what we're doing now as Cohere, that we believed that there was a better future for refugees, and education was the way that we in the early years felt that we could contribute and play an active role as an organization. And so education has always been part of it, and even today, education is still central, as I'm going to show in a bit more detail in a minute. And as I mentioned before, the number of people displaced around the world has increased from 42 million people to over 82 million. But this figure, which is the official figure, as an example, doesn't include the 1 million people who have fled from Ukraine just in the last 1 week, and actually is out of date even before that. So this just goes to show how the context is changing. In East Africa, it's changed, around the world it's changed, and we have to change the way we respond. And that's why over time, we as an organization, we have evolved how we work and into the model that we have now. But this is a good example here of how education is still very central. to the end result. You know, education still is a vital, as much as ever, needed by refugee children as well as young adults, and lifelong learning as well. So to show you why I think that our current model of working as Cohere is so, we're so confident about it. This is just one example of YIDA, Youth Initiative Development Agency, one of our 33 partners. They're based in Chaka, in southwest Uganda. So YIDA run a nursery school for over 600 children. I visited there in November. It's one of the only nursery schools in the whole of Chaka settlement. And they don't receive currently any funding from any large donors to run it. They run the whole thing themselves, and they even raise the vast majority of their funds themselves. And the way they do that is by running social enterprises in the settlement, which they have started. They have some retail. They're also doing some microfinance and other financial services, which enable them to raise revenue to run this school, which is a really inspiring story. And it's only one of many. You know, I said we have 33 partners who we work closely with, and many hundreds of RLOs that we're in touch with who are all doing inspiring things like that. So you can see that as Cohere, we see these examples of inspiring stories and genuine impact, sustainable impact. I'll just wait, but maybe Chris, if you could mute the feedback there, would be great. Thank you. And you can see how, for us as a small organization as Cohere, we would want to partner with the leaders of YIDA and try to see how we can support them in what they're doing, so that their impact can grow, so that they can also, so that their work can also become more sustainable, and that they can then have an influence, maybe, for example, for early learning across the whole settlement and beyond. Another exciting thing that YIDA do is they do capacity strengthening with other refugee-led organizations that are emerging in Chaka. YIDA have been there for quite a few years, and there are new groups popping up, and YIDA are taking them under their wing and trying to show them how they can establish themselves as well. So you can really see this mutual peer support, and how this whole trend of more refugee-led responses is just going to get stronger. Now, this also isn't a new thing for us working with RLOs. This picture here, taken in 2012 with a handful of people who are all now involved in running their own organizations. And then this time in 2012, we were part of something called the Refugee Grassroots Network, which had about 5 or 6 small organizations, included Xavier Project. And we all just got together to see how smaller organizations, mostly refugee-led, can come together and do more in their community. And so it's been at least 10 years, if not more, that we've directly worked with RLOs. Unfortunately, everyone in that picture now looking a bit more portly and middle-aged than they were then, but the good part is that all of those organizations that we were working with back then are going from strength to strength now, and we still partner with them as well. This is in 2016 when we really started to pivot towards working with RLOs as our main way of working, and realizing by that point that there was not a huge reason for us as Xavier Project, as we were then, to to be delivering activities ourselves as an NGO when RLOs were doing such good work in the communities. And they were really starting from scratch. This is Tomorrow Vijanda, the same group I introduced you to at the beginning, who would come together under this tree to teach each other English, being mostly, all of them from Congo, speaking French and Swahili, and English being an important language to know in Uganda. So a few years later, we, in close partnership with Tomorrow Vijana, they'd really transformed into an organization, and they're now a leading organization in the whole of Southwest Uganda. Similar to YIDA, have brought a lot of other RLOs under their mentorship, and they've created a network of 16 RLOs just in their settlement, among many other inspiring things that they've done. And this was possible partly through our partnership, which was made possible through generous donors supporting this concept in the very early stages. Cohere also carries with it the legacy of Urban Refugees, an NGO that we have joined forces with earlier this year, which also points to the timing for this rebrand. And Urban Refugees was founded in 2012. They, as the name suggests, focused on urban refugees around the world and had an advocacy focus. And around 5 years ago, they, similarly to us, began to partner with RLOs. I won't say us, I mean as Xavier Project, as we were. And actually we're doing very similar kind of work in working with RLOs. They had slight nuances and differences compared to what Xavier Project was doing, from advocacy, which they had a big strength in, as well as working with women-led groups and groups led by other marginalized groups of refugees. And their vision was so similar to Xavier Project's that we eventually got to the point where we realized we could do more as one organization, bringing their strengths and their experiences together so that we can really move forward together as Cohere, as one organization. So this rebrand provides this opportunity for the two organizations to come together under one brand. I think it also gives us an opportunity to really emphasize our renewed focus and energy in working with RLOs and refugee leaders. It's good timing as well in terms of our launch of a 5-year strategy will be launched later this month for sure. From that, we'll go into a lot more detail about how we work with RLOs, and I hope to share that with you as well. And I'd be happy to share more in the Q&A as well about exactly what we do. We've been really grateful to Crispin Porter-Bruguski, a London advertising agency that's given us a huge amount of pro bono support in this rebrand process. It's been a fascinating process. We actually began thinking about rebranding something like 2 years ago, but at least for the last 15 months, we've been actively working on this launch of the new brand. And one of the reasons that we did it so thoroughly was because we wanted the whole process to be collaborative. And we, as such, we reached out to a lot of our partner organizations, refugees we've worked with in the past, donors, stakeholders, other operating organizations that we partner with. And we really listened, but we also wanted to reflect deeply on our identity as an organization so that our brand could communicate that sense of positivity and hope that we have for a different way of doing things, as well as the concept of bringing people together around around a cause that people can believe in. As I said earlier, it's exciting to see refugee-led organizations playing so much more of a significant role, not just in day-to-day activities in refugee hosting contexts, but also now having an influence across the whole humanitarian sector and all humanitarian responses, refugees getting a seat at the table in decisions that affect their lives. But it's still very early days, and there's still a long way to go for this idea of refugee-led initiatives, and for refugees themselves to be in control of decisions that affect their lives, as well as the resources. Is still early days, and as Cohere, we feel we're still very much at the beginning. We have a lot of positivity, but if we're going to get there, we do need help. And there's so many ways that you can be involved. And I know many of the people on this call already are very involved in and very supportive of this idea more broadly. I know many of you would like to know more about some of what the refugee-led organizations are doing, and would like to better understand what it means to be an RLO. And it's great that we actually have quite a few on this call today. If you'd like to learn a bit more, we have launched a platform along with some other RLO partners called Reframe. That's reframe.network. And on that website, you can see over 70 RLOs who have their profiles, who are showing what they're doing. And then otherwise, just go through to our website, wearecohere.org, to learn of other ways you can get involved and support, donate, and just generally give us the encouragement that we have relied on from our support community for so many years. So that's the end of the presentation, and now we have a chance for anyone to ask questions. I would really welcome any questions, and also I'm glad to have some team members to help answer some. You may have felt there were areas I could have gone into more detail, which is understandable. I'll be very happy to do that. So if you have any questions, please go ahead. And I don't know if maybe already there are some. I'll have a look at the participants list, and if you have a question, just put your hand up. I can see there's one already from Richard, which is great. Really good to hear from you, Richard. Go ahead.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks, everyone. My name is Richard. I'm a former employee at Xavier Project. And yeah, thanks for the presentation. It was really great to see the new direction that you guys are taking, and yeah, really welcome what you're doing. I guess my question is, and maybe it's too early days for one of them, but it's that mechanism for making sure refugees are at the heart of decision making within Cohere. How are you actually envisaging that? Is there going to be some kind of grants mechanism, or yeah, just a bit more detail on that would be really interesting. And then kind of coupled with that is, do you see Cohere's role being more around sourcing funding and coordination and sharing best practice with the RLOs, or are there other areas that you're also looking at? Thanks.
Great. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, really good questions. And I'm really glad you asked the first one about refugee leadership within Cohere, because it's something I'd like to talk about, and it's something that's going to come out more strongly as well in our 5-year strategic plan. A few initiatives that we're working on in Cohere around that. One is we are launching a refugee advisory panel, We've been in the process of doing so for a few months, and it's not quite ready to go live. And that we really hope that board will really play the same function as any other of our boards that we have, except for the fact that they won't necessarily need to be legally registered or play that sort of legal liability role, but in terms of influence, guidance, mentoring, to very much guide the organization just as much. That's one of a few initiatives. We also have others in terms of increasing the number of full-time staff we have who are refugees. And I won't go into a huge amount of detail on that now. Some of those are in process, and we've actually started some recruitment on that as well, so which is exciting. And because we do believe, that not if you base recruitment like that on merit, then there are so many refugees just in East Africa who have the experience, credentials to really contribute to what we're doing as Cohere, as a member of our full-time team. And so that will happen more and more, and hopefully over time that will evolve so that goes all the way through to all layers of the organization. But hopefully I'll be able to share more when the strategy comes out. Just to answer your other question briefly, there are four main areas that we work with RLOs. Capacity strengthening and sharing is the first one, where we have a course which is one of the elements of our capacity strengthening and sharing, as well as just having a presence on the ground. So in all the locations we're working, we have a team, full-time team on the ground, who are just there as a as someone to talk to, as organizations go through the challenges of trying to grow and increase their impact. I could talk more about our course, but it's called capacity sharing because we've put it together with contributions from all of our partners, and some of our partners are also delivering those modules to other RLOs as well. Then funding wise, we're able to raise some funds as Cohere that we can channel to RLOs, which is exciting. And that actually, on one of the slides which I missed, there was a point that this year we've already managed to raise $500,000 to give to our existing RLO partners through various different funding contracts that we have. And some of that we've already been able to disperse this year, but we'll be dispersing more throughout the year. But it's not all about channeling funds through us as Cohere. We're very happy, if not more happy, when other donors can directly fund RLOs, and it achieves what we want to do just as much. And then the other two, more briefly, coordination, which includes coordination amongst our existing partners, but also supporting RLOs to play a bigger role in humanitarian coordination, and then advocacy, which is advocacy led by Cohere, as well as supporting RLOs in their own advocacy initiative. So that's about as brief as I can on sort of more of the how of what we do.
Yeah, cheers, Ed. Sorry, it's a big question, but yeah,
no, it's a good question.
That's really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, see Vuga, yes, you have a question. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Vuga William, a refugee from South Sudan, based in Pagirinya Refugee Settlement in the Ajuman district. I work with the EF as executive director, and for the last 1 year during COVID-19, we have been working on house prototypes, how young people use technology and build their own resource centers, and which we are successful. And currently we have 4,200 young people that actually use the space for learning ICT basic skills. And recently this month we launched a Refugees Architecture Books Library, which is in Adjumani district, Uganda. So my question is, I got this link today. It's a little bit hard. Refugees are young people to have access on internet and electricity, and these are our challenges. My question is, how do such an initiative reach down to the remote area that can help the young people who have a talented and idea that they can showcase? So I was thinking, is all well, who is responsible to take peer public resources for the young people that have idea in refugees that they could not have access to internet? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yes, I believe I've heard of your organization in Palarinia. Congratulations for the great work that you're doing. And I would say there are various ways that we could further collaborate with as Cohere. And also I could share a bit more about how we would like to engage more with the types of organizations you're talking about and young people in a more remote setting. So firstly, I mentioned Reframe.network, and I don't know off the top of my head if YAF is registered on Reframe, where you can upload your profile and share a bit more about the work you're doing, the needs that you have, and the ideas that you have. And we hope to continue developing that platform. In terms of our own presence in that location, as Cohere, the nearest team we have is based in West Nile, Arua, and Mvepi. So it's still a little bit far from Palarinia at the moment. Be really interesting one day for us to expand there. I know quite a few partners, including UNHCR, would like us to try and reach that far if we can. So as Cohere, we'd really like to do that. But on a broader point about working with remote groups and groups that are really just starting out, we see that as one of our strengths in supporting groups who fit that kind of category. One of the reasons is that our presence on the ground means that we're not so dependent on, for example, Zoom calls, which other capacity strengthening programs might rely on remote connectivity and so on, but we do most of it, nearly all of it, in person. And partly because of that presence on the ground, we're also able to engage in different ways with RLOs who might be less established. Maybe they don't even have a bank account. Some aren't even registered, but we've still been able to partner with them because there are other ways of channeling funds. If you think of mobile transfers and even there are other ways that we've been able to support RLOs who are working in very remote locations, who are still at the beginning of their existence. We also note that there's a huge spectrum in terms of levels of experience and of RLOs within Kenya and Uganda and other countries. There are some, as I said, have been going for over 25 years. Some are multinational NGOs already receiving a lot of funding. And there are others that are just starting out. And as Cohere, we'd really like to be an organization that can identify potential leaders and leaders who are just starting in their journey right at an early stage. We see that as one of our strengths, is supporting groups very early on. You can see from one of the slides, we're in Tomorrow Vijana in 2016, where they didn't have any structure, they weren't registered, they only just had a name. And that's where we see our strength coming in with those types of organizations. So in principle, I think we'd love to do more of what you're suggesting, and hope that we will. got a few other hands up. I'm just going to look at the chat. So forgive me for trying to read some of the questions, but I think, okay, good. So we've got a couple of questions on the chat. I think, Bahana, thanks for your question. I'm going to take John Marie, he's got his hand up first, and then I'll read over your question and try and answer. But otherwise, yeah, others, anyone else who has a question, go ahead and put your hand up. I'll be happy to answer. So Jean Marie, over to you. Good to see you.
Yes. Hello, everyone. So this is Jean Marie. Thank you so much for briefing us about the rebrand. Sorry for that. I'm quite in a road at the moment, but anyway, I wanted to ask two questions. But first, to say congratulations once more. I think Xavier Project has been one of the leading, or if not the first organization to actually appreciate most of the refugee organizations and their work. But two questions around that. So one is, for most people who knew Xavier Project as an organization that's supporting education for refugees, and they're confused of if that is continuing or how that will happen, what's the answer to that? Secondly is, as an advocate myself, sometimes one of the issues you hear the development actors saying is that, for example, they don't have much information, or they have a perception of RLOs in terms of how they can deliver and how much they can get in terms of funding sometimes. So as Cohere, with this new rebrand and the way everything looks hopeful and it's more oriented to the future of refugees and the refugees themselves taking that future for themselves and doing much, how are you looking at changing that perception of refugees just being people who can, for example, be assisted only, or when they have to be engaged, it's not very meaningful. It's on limited funding or even little funding. Sometimes it's even on just mobilization. So in terms of changing that perception from some of the development actors who don't understand the importance of RLOs. And I just want to also say the fact that you've pointed out how RLOs continued with their work during COVID says how much they are significant in the community. So in terms of using such and other ways, how are you looking to change that perception moving forward? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Jean Marie. Great questions. In terms of perceptions, I agree with you that there are still a lot of assumptions, there's still a lot of misconceptions, and there are other barriers that I think are preventing more support going and recognition going to RLOs. But in terms of perception, I think it is gradually changing. And I think the best thing to do is to look at positives of, and also to carry on doing as much as you're doing, and you're a good example of this, irrespective of some negative perceptions or perceptions that, you know, still might need to be changed. Because it's only through, it's going to take time, but it's through good examples, good stories, that perceptions are slowly changed. We as Cohere, as I mentioned, we have an advocacy section or area of our work, and that's done ourselves in some cases. For example, I'm part of a working group leading up to the UNHCR NGO consultations in June. Actually, a few other people on this call are involved in it, where we can really get these conversations going with hundreds of people. But also refugee-led advocacy, like you at YBC do very well, is slowly changing the tide on this. And while there will maybe always be some some people who don't get it. I think the critical mass is shifting, so it's just basically keep doing what we're doing and more. But I think on your first question, it cut out a bit. Was it about our previous direct support to refugees and what the future of that is?
It was around the scholarships of education scholarships, the normal education scholarship for high school. Is that continuing? Is it something that you're going to do it in another way for any refugee who knows Xavier Project and now hears it's Cohere and it's more of all the things you've already mentioned? How is that going to happen? Is that program still going to continue?
Yeah, thank you very much for raising that. I think it's a really important question. We, as you know, scholarships and paying school fees was something that we did for many years as in terms of our objectives around education. We've been lucky and happy in the last 5, 6, or even 7 years to partner with UNHCR on that as an implementing partner. So we were implementing for UNHCR funding which they had raised to pay school fees for secondary students in urban areas of Kenya. And the good thing is that UNHCR is committed to continuing that, and I think it's a really important project. I think there will always be a need for paying school fees for a certain number of students in Nairobi and urban areas of Kenya, and I feel confident from what UNHCR is saying that they want to continue prioritizing that. Exactly how they do that from now on, I'm not completely sure right now, but we are talking to those students to help them to be reassured that their experience shouldn't change a huge amount. I'd just like to answer Bahana's question. He's got 2 really good questions on here. And the first question asks whether Cohere will extend to other people of concern-led organizations like IDP groups and minorities. So we actually already partner with some groups that are led by host community or a mix of refugees and host community. We are, as Cohere, we're focused on the whole community, of course. Integration between refugees and the hosting communities is really important. We don't at the moment work with IDP groups just because of the nature of the countries we're in. But in principle, especially when it comes to Reframe, we're expecting to see some IDP-led groups. I think there's 1 or 2 who've signed up on Reframe already. In terms of other minority groups, we're really happy to just in the last 1 or 2 years build close partnerships with our RLOs focused on some of those that you mentioned, from LGBT, women-led organizations. We have quite a few, and we now have 1 or 2 partners led by people with disabilities as well. Urban refugees were really strong on that, and we've learned from that. Coming together with urban refugees, but we've also, through an expanded network, been able to work with more groups like that. And your other question about going beyond the East Africa region, we're at Reframe, we hope we'll soon be able to reach RLOs in different parts of the world, and we might play a slightly different role for groups who are, for example, in Malaysia and Indonesia, where we have a partner who's hoping to recruit some RLOs from there in the next few weeks or months. So it's and then Southern Africa and West Africa as well in the near future. So yes. Okay, so are there any other questions, even in the chat? If you have a question, there's still 2 more minutes, and also it doesn't have to be a question. It might be just a comment, something that you've thought of that I haven't been able to mention today, or maybe one of my colleagues might have something they wanted to add.
Yes. My name is Bizo. Diaba Bizo
Bizo.
from L'Africana in Nairobi. Mine is just to say congratulations to Xavier Project for this rebranding and the merger with the Urban Refugee. And we believe at L'Africana that this is done in good faith in order to expand and make effective the service delivery we have been giving since your inception as an organization. We really appreciate your support as an organization, and we know that Xavier Project was the first organization to partner with us officially and support us in so many ways. You have really played a big role in our growth as an organization, and we really appreciate that. And from now on, since you have rebranded, we are looking forward for more partnership, stronger one, and more efficient ones. Thank you very much again. We really appreciate.
Thank you, Bizo. Really appreciate that. That's really kind. And we look forward to further collaboration with L'Africana for sure. One of our longest standing partners, doing really inspiring work. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello, Deo.
Yes. Hello, Eddie. How are you?
Fine. How are you doing?
I'm good. Congratulations for rebranding your name, because somehow it was confusing. Yeah, Xavier Project. You could think of a project, yeah, yet it is an organization. Yeah. But one thing I would like to ask you is one. Yeah. Xavier Project is expanding in so many areas. Yeah. So here we have A and Q. Yeah. But are people informed that Xavier Project has rebranded its name? Because making that awareness may be a problem. People may still be knowing Xavier Project.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, absolutely. I think it's a good point, and it's not going to happen overnight that suddenly everybody that we've ever worked with as Xavier Project is going to know that we're now Cohere. But we will keep reinforcing, and with our previous supporters and our previous networks, and I suppose reminding over the next few, probably at least 1 year, if not more, that this change has happened. We'll do that in various different ways, but yeah, we're aware it won't happen overnight. We've been trying over the course of this week, and this Q&A is one example, to try and get the word out and to give people the opportunity to learn a bit more. So
there's another question in the chat box and one raised hand, if we've got time.
Yeah, I've seen that other question. So from Richard, thank you. So I think it's important it's a good question. Is Cohere going to be doing anything different from Xavier Project? We rebranded on Wednesday, and we're not suddenly doing anything different from what we were doing on Tuesday. We are very much the same organization. But I was trying to show through the presentation earlier that we have evolved, I suppose, like every organization does. And we will continue to evolve as Cohere. But in terms of what you may know about us when we were Xavier Project, and now what you know of us as Cohere, I wouldn't be concerned that there are any big differences. We're still the same organization. Okay, so I know we've gone past the hour, so if people need to leave, will obviously understand, and thank you so much again for coming along. I can see another question from Khalif Mohammed Omar. Maybe we could make that the last one, then we can wrap up. So yes, go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is Khalif, as you see, and I'm the German Somali Community Association in Uganda, and we are one of the communities who benefits the Xavier, especially the young education, and before the COVID-19, 2017, 2018. And we really appreciate Xavier Project. And the last time when you are making the partner of Refugee, I was participate for that event. And really, I'm very happy to give you this opportunity and to announce these opportunities. So just I want to ask you one question. So now COVID-19 is finished, and we are the largest refugee community in this country, Uganda, in Kampala. So we have many most vulnerable people. So will you planning in the future to touch those ground, most vulnerable people? Because the refugee now, they are fed up and they are immigrating from Kampala onto deserts, Libya, Mediterranean. They are dying, they are in cells because they grow here and they have been here more than 25 years. The children who born here already, they are graduate from secondary school. They don't have job. The parents, they become old, they become sick. The UNHCR is not enough for those people, what they're earning, 2 kg cooking oil, 5 kg. So the 12 large family can't enough that things, even 1 week. So how are you planning in the future for those most vulnerable people? Thank you very much to give me this opportunity.
Thank you very much. It's a really good question. I think the best way that I can answer that is to say we want to do more of what I've been talking about and do it better. And we hope that through that we will reach the most vulnerable in one way or another, and hopefully in the most effective way. And I want to give an example to explain what I mean. I'll give a handful of examples. During COVID-19, refugees in Kampala, as you will know much better than me, I'm sure, didn't have access to certain handouts of basic provisions and food. And the organizations that best tried to respond to this, who best managed to overcome this massive challenge that refugees faced in Kampala, where the economy was basically shut down completely, those organizations were RLOs, much more so than any other type of organization. So as Cohere, the best thing we can do is to try and encourage more of that type of support from RLOs and leadership from RLOs in actually reaching the most vulnerable. Given another example, in Rwanda, nearly every refugee that comes into Uganda who has albinos go to Rwanda. There's over 70 families there with albinism, and they get most of their support from RLOs, not from any other type of organization. So I think in supporting RLOs is how we reach the most vulnerable. To answer your question.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Yes, so I think that's a good question to finish on. Thanks so much again to everyone. And as I said, we'd love to stay in touch. It's a collaborative concept, a collaborative idea. So we're really grateful for you for showing your interest. And as I said, it's just the beginning. So let's carry on working together. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.